Welcome to the Roost Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Pitcher. Today's guest we have on is Jonathan Cartwright. He has his bachelor's and master's in sports and nutrition sciences, has done research on the benefits of nitrate supplementation, exercise performance, and he has spent the last 7 years with Beet It, currently as the brand and sales manager. Coming all the way from the UK today. Super appreciative for him taking the time to be able to do that. Jonathan, welcome.
Yeah, great, Sean. It's great to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
So, John, let's start out with what is your roots? Who are you behind Jonathan, the brand, Beet It?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, I'm based in the UK, as you mentioned. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I've got a little boy who's 15 months, so he's keeping us busy at the moment, not getting too much sleep. All in all, I'm passionate about sports and exercise. Have been for over a decade, if not more. I've always been into sports myself. Never quite reached the high level, but I've always had an interest in various aspects of sport and exercise science. And yeah, I sort of grew up in the countryside, in the kind of West Midlands of the UK. So yeah, a bit of a country boy at heart, I suppose, and now living in the city. And yeah, I suppose that's my roots in a nutshell, I'd say.
Yeah, we just moved from Atlanta. We're currently in Alabama, and it's a night and day difference. Like living in the city and then like going to the country. It's just so much more peaceful and relaxed, and there's not all this traffic and all this like hustle and bustle you have to deal with. It's just we're like we made the right move.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I loved growing up there as a kid. I think you got so much space, and I guess you don't know any different when you're a kid either. So now I'm living in the city. It's great to have things that are so nearby and convenient, but I think my heart probably is with the countryside still. So I do go back there to visit family, which is nice. But yeah, I think I'll be set in the city. My wife certainly doesn't want to live in the country. So yeah,
So you
we'll be
got the
set
polar opposites when it comes to that, man.
here.
You got the
Yeah,
ebbs and flow. You'll get what you want. Sometimes she'll get what she wants. Sometimes everyone's happy at the end of the day.
that's it. It's always a compromise, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. So did you always want to work in the sports industry? So did you start playing sports? Like how did you kind of come into this space?
Yeah, so I've always been into sports. I guess as a kid, I played football or soccer, as you'd say, and rugby union is what I was mainly into as a kid growing up. Played at college level, university level as well. I didn't quite get to the highest levels, so I really wanted to be involved within sports, and I just got quite fascinated really with all the various different facets that surround sports and how you can improve performance, whether it's through training, through nutrition, through looking at biomechanics. So yeah, I'd say I've always had an interest, and that's really what led me to doing my degree. And the sports science degree was quite broad, which I think was brilliant because you get I guess a broad understanding of various different aspects of sports science. And then for the master's degree, I kind of honed down into sports nutrition. So I got sort of narrower as I went through, which I guess is a path that most people take, I suppose, if you go on to do a master's degree. So, but yeah.
Yeah, my fiance recently worked with rugby at Life University, which is an NAIA school, but it's like every single year they win probably at least the sevens and 15s, at least one of those every single year on the girls or the guys side. And it was an awesome experience being able because I watched rugby before. It's starting to come a little bit more common here in the States. Obviously me being having a background in football and then going watching rugby, like it's obviously a little bit different, having to figure out all the roles and
Mhm.
what goes into it. But I almost, I enjoyed it quite a bit. So I'm glad that it's coming this way. And I think, definitely over time, people will enjoy watching rugby. And I think it'll become a little bit bigger too. We obviously have USA Rugby. They're starting to have some rugby teams spread throughout the US from a professional standpoint. Obviously, nothing in comparison to like Australia
Mhm.
and New Zealand and over there in Europe. Obviously, I've watched the All Blacks on TV before. Like those guys are just at a different level.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think rugby as a sport is really hoping to kind of become more popular in the States.
Mm,
I think the issue is that the sport often tries to compare itself against the likes of NFL, and it's not really ever
yeah.
going to get to that level, I don't think. But yeah, there's a lot of sort of top players that have come towards the end of their career that are playing in the States, and I think that seems to be helping to grow the game. And rugby sevens has been quite big in the States. I know
Yep.
that's probably a little bit easier to understand what's going on. It's a bit more fast paced. But yeah, it'd be good to see, if it can keep on growing as a sport, really, because it's a sport that I love and it's got a strong following in the UK. So yeah,
I mean,
let's
it's
see how
like
it
it's
goes.
like I worked with soccer for quite a few years as well, and soccer is the same thing. Well, or call it football. I've been corrected multiple times for that too. Like, we got American football, and you got like obviously soccer overseas or in other different countries. But it's the same thing. Like, obviously you got the MLS, but a lot of people argue it's never going to be as competitive as other teams across. So, but that's the good banter and the good fun that we always have with the athletes and coaches and stuff that we work with. So, can you tell us a little bit about Beat It? How did Beat It start? Why did it start? How did it come to be?
Yeah, of course. So Beet It is a brand of James White Drinks. So James White is basically a fruit and vegetable juice manufacturing company, and we're based about an hour north of London. So we've been pressing all sorts of fruits and vegetable juices for just over 40 years now. So really, we're like a grocery retail company, manufacturing company. And it wasn't until 2007, 2008, we were approached by some researchers in Scandinavia, and they were looking at the effects of nitrates on helping to reduce high blood pressure. At the time, it was like a synthetic form, so like sodium and potassium nitrates. They then found that nitrate is found in the diet through lots of green leafy vegetables, and beetroot was really the only one that can be, I guess, consumed in enough quantity to have an impact on reducing high blood pressure. So at the time, we were the only beetroot juice manufacturing company in the UK. So and we had no idea, what it was going to lead to. So we just said, yeah, sure, we'll supply you with our juice. And they quickly found that you'd have to have about a pint or half a litres worth of regular juice to get enough nitrate in the system. Um, but what they did find was that it did help to lower high blood pressure. And it kind of pricked up the ears of the sports scientists out there at the time. And they're thinking, well, if it can impact people's, sort of blood vessels and helping to dilate, maybe that's sort of going to be beneficial for athletes. And then it was 2009. The researchers down in the University of Exeter, where I did my undergraduate degree, they then looked at the effects of beetroot juice on helping to lower the oxygen cost of exercise, and in effectively helping to improve people's endurance, really. So they found that it helped to reduce the oxygen costs by like 16%, I think it was. So I guess that was what you call the landmark study in the world of sports science. And it was only a couple of years afterwards I did my undergraduate there. So it was quite an exciting time about this new thing that seems a bit too good to be true. And since then, we've really, the company has supplied over 300 universities around the world. Research has taken two routes, really. So one of them has been the world of sports. So we've looked at things like endurance on the bike, endurance for running. They've even looked at strength and force production. They've looked at effects on intermittent sprint performance that you get on the field in a team sport match. So yeah, it's kind of accumulated over the years. And I think the great thing about us is that we don't fund any research. And I mean that in the sense that there's no perceived bias. We don't know what they're going to research. So there's usually something new that pops up every month, really. So it's great to see what's being done. And the other arm is with the health, so that helping to improve nitric oxide production in the body, which has been shown to be beneficial for helping lower blood pressure and various different sort of disease states in different populations. So yeah, as a company, we kind of fell into the world of sports, really. So, and for a long time, the company didn't really have anyone in house that knew the world of sports science and sports. So they just sort of ran with it, I suppose. And yeah, I guess that's where I came into it a fair few years down the line after they've been going. So yeah, it's really just sort of fell into the world, and we haven't really changed a great deal. We're still producing just natural vegetable juices, and we just happen to be supplying a large amount of the sports world now.
Yeah, I think what couple things. It only takes one person to spread the word, especially if it's a researcher and individual that believes in what you're doing, and then obviously they'll tell everybody else. So that's always important. A lot of companies I feel like are moving this route. I mean, I'm seeing this very commonly in food companies, supplement companies here in the U.S. They're hiring sports dietitians or practitioners or having experts on their panel, if you want to call it, to support their brand and the research and what they're doing. just because we know there's just so much misinformation out there, especially on social media. 90% of the stuff out there is just absolute garbage. So the more practitioners we can have with these companies that actually can put out like what the true stats and research and information that's actually coming out, and if it's applicable and how do we apply it, I think is super important as we continue to keep going down the
Mm.
line. And we definitely know, obviously, with research, sometimes, you talked about beets kind of very early on. There's a lot of things that can have benefits or practitioners have seen they have benefits, but it may take a little bit for the research to be able to catch up. So the
Yeah, yeah.
more universities and places we kind of spread our wings and the more unbiased
Mm.
research and opinions we can get is always obviously favored as well. A lot of times we deal with research in the US, it's by those major 15, 20 companies like a Pepsi or a Coca-Cola. And it's like, well, was that just
Yeah.
favored results because the company wanted favorite results, or like was these like actual results that were true based on what they looked at?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's always important to be quite critical of research that's been published because, and I think you have to be kind of trained like to know that as well, because it's
Mm-hmm.
one thing looking at something in the media where they have a headline, and then it's another thing looking into where they got that from, and then looking into that paper and seeing, well, is there any bias in there, and what are the limitations? So I think for me, it's been great working for a company sort of straight from my research that I guess is grounded in the kind of credibility and integrity. And that was really important to me. I couldn't work for a company that was trying to pull the wool over people's eyes or trying to make claims that had no sort of substance behind it. So for me, it was really important because that would never shift in me, because I guess that's just my background in the research. So
Mm-hmm.
it's nice to work for a company that has the evidence to support what's being said about it, I guess. So yeah.
Yeah, I was originally I did a year of PhD work at Ole Miss, and like my research was going to be with beet juice or beet powder, for power based athletes or strength based athletes. Didn't obviously follow away all the way through with it, but I did learn a ton about it, which I was super excited about, and that's why I'm still a utilizer today. Um, a lot of the research when I
Yeah.
was originally looking up papers was from Beat It. And like when I've connected with Beat It in the past, like, they have thousands of different studies and places that they've worked with. And a lot of research was over there in Europe, not some of those other countries in comparison to the US. So you guys have definitely put out a lot in comparison to what's currently being done over here. And that's a lot of the recommendation
Mm.
stuff is where I've based that off of.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like I say, because we've been quite fortunate, really, in that we've been able to supply a huge amount of research teams over the world, and they've chosen us, I guess, for a good reason. The main thing is that we are sort of natural. There's only two ingredients in our shot, beetroot and lemon. And the most important thing is that we can give them what they need to do, a robust research. So we do a nitrate rich shot, as you know, and we do a placebo one as well. So which
Mhm.
has no nitrate in, but the look, taste, smell, the exact same. So it just enables the research to do like a double blind crossover study. So the participants and the researchers have no idea which one is, I guess, the active shot. Because, at shows and when we meet athletes and consumers, they often say, oh, is it not just all on your head? And we can say, well, actually, it's not. We have studies to show that it's not. And I think that's so important because with other, supplements out there like caffeine, for example, you can tell someone they're going to have caffeine and it can have the same benefit as if they were to have it. The power of the mind is amazing. But because the beetroot acts on like a physiological level, I suppose it was a little bit easier to kind of isolate that, I suppose. And the placebo just gives these researchers a really great basis to have a really strong, robust research, and that's really what researchers should all be striving to do, isn't it? Just having
Yeah.
strong research that's reliable, I guess.
I've had a lot of athletes, clients. I've switched them over to using beats that were heavily utilized in coffee. Getting the anxiousness, the nervousness, relying on it as a energy source when it's really not providing you energy,
Mhm.
and switching over to this option where they're not getting a lot of those symptoms. Have definitely been really successful there. You mentioned, the physiological part. Can you just explain this into a very simple, easy way? How does it work? Like if I'm drinking the beet juice, if I'm eating a beet, like how does it work from like my mouth to my intestines to my bloodstream to provide us this benefit and effect?
Yeah, of course. So with beetroot and the nitrate in beetroot, there is the kind of conversion that has to happen in the body before you get the benefit. So you have to consume the product a good 2 to 3 hours before you're going to do any exercise, just because it takes that time for your body to break it down. So really what happens is I guess I'll try and sort of summarize it. But it's they call it like a secondary pass. So you consume the beetroot with the nitrate in, it gets uptaken into the bloodstream through the intestine. It then gets secreted into the mouth, and as it gets secreted, it gets sort of super concentrated, and there's bacteria on the tongue that help to break down the nitrate to nitrite. So I guess that's the initial, conversion. We then swallow it again on secondary pass, and then it gets uptaken into the bloodstream, and it either gets converted into nitric oxide in the stomach through this like the acidic environment, or it gets transported around the body to various different sites, whether it be the muscle, the heart, and it could be converted to nitric oxide there. So that's why it takes a bit of time, because it's got to be sort of digested, I guess, almost sort of twice. And that's really ultimately it's about increasing the amount of nitrates, and nitric oxide in your bloodstream and in your muscles, really. What happens is it's a bit like sort of glucose and glycogen in the way that it's stored. So, and it's only recently they found this. So what the body does is when you consume the products, you'll have it elevated in your bloodstream, but your body will also store it in the muscle. So there's like a reservoir of nitrate that's been shown to be stored in the muscle cells. So, and the researchers now believe that's a reason why we need to kind of preload on the juice, because you want to maximize the storage capacity. So when you go to do like an NFL game, an American football game, or a marathon, your body will sort of utilize it in the blood first, and then it will draw it from the muscle as and when it's needed. So similar to glucose, really. So yeah, some researchers down in Exeter, they looked into this, and what they found was quite incredible. They found that it's stored in the muscle cells, and this may have quite a significant impact. Can we sort of manipulate it? Can we maximize the storage through supplementation? So I guess that's what happens with a conversion, but then the kind of sort of benefit of it is the body will use nitrate and nitric oxide when you exercise, and there's various different ways that nitric oxide impacts the body. Primarily it's a vasodilator, so it helps to sort of relax our blood vessels, increasing blood flow, oxygen supply to the working muscles. But nitric oxide, it's like a tree. It's got so many different branches of what it's connected with. So for exercise, one of the key benefits is that it's been shown to help lower the energy or oxygen demand of exercise. So like a good way to think of that would be if you're running a marathon, whilst on beetroot juice, you can maintain the same pace, but your body uses less energy or less oxygen to maintain that pace. So it's like having a more fuel efficient car. There's a bit more fuel left in the tank at the end because you've been more efficient with how you use it. And that's they don't fully understand how, because it gets quite in depth with the mechanisms, but they think it's all to do with what's going on in the mitochondria, the energy factories in the body, and helping it work more efficiently, I guess.
How consistent will you have to be with the loading or taking it to get to, let's say, to that extent, or that, is there like a 2, 3, 4 week ramp up period of like consistently taking it before you maybe see some of these significant benefits? Is it a week? Like, what is, like, let's say someone who's going to start utilizing Beet It or beet juice products, when should they expect maybe some of these feelings or benefits that might occur or pop up?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, there's been research, they've looked at all sorts of types of dosing, but the general consensus on it is that you need to preload at least sort of 3 to 6 days before like competition or a race to really get the benefits. And they think that's really the reason for that is because you're maximizing the storage, I guess, that you have. So yeah, it's best consumed over sort of consecutive days. Any more than a week, there's no sort of added benefit. And I think that's probably because there's probably only so much you can store. A bit like if you're going to sort of carb load before a marathon, there's a
You're gonna
window
store so
which,
much in your muscles, you're gonna store so much in your liver, and
yeah,
then it's gonna turn to adipose tissue. Like,
yeah, that's the thing. So, and we do find that people do ask, what about take beta all the time, and that's fine because if you're training all the time, or you're that we supply a lot of the teams in the Tour de France, so they've got stages over a month or so, then having it back to back would be beneficial. Um, and interestingly, unlike caffeine, where the more you have, the effects sort of wean off, uh, it doesn't seem to occur with nitrate. So you can have it it's been shown to be consumed over like 6 months, and it's still effective, helping to lower blood pressure. And yeah, they think that's because it's like an evolutionary thing that the body is sort of evolved to continue getting benefits out of green leafy vegetables from the diet, whereas caffeine, there's probably a limit to how much you want to have, a bit like you were saying earlier.
Yeah, I always tell my athletes or whoever I work with, I'm like, there's that fine line. Like, there's going to be the ergogenic benefit where it's going to be a plus, but you start going over to this end, anxious, nervous, jittery, like now you're starting to make mistakes that you probably don't commonly make or you don't want to make, just based off of like, oh, I just slammed this caffeine drink down, and all of a sudden, like, I feel like I'm going 1,000 miles a minute. It's like, well, that's not always a positive.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we've all been there, haven't we, where we kind of have a bit too much. And I
Yeah.
think it's not a good thing because it's really hard to come back, from that, isn't it? And especially if you're like playing in a team sport where you've got to think, and react quickly. You don't want to be going on overdrive where it can kind of throw you out. So yeah, and that's a good thing about nitrate and beetroot. It's not a stimulant, so you're not going to feel like an elation. It's happening on like a physiological level, so you're not going to feel it. The only time where I say people may sort of feel it is where if they're used to say running or for a set distance, they might feel they've got a bit more energy in the tank at the end of the run, where they'd usually start to feel fatigued.
Like a little more
And
like a
obviously,
back leg
yeah,
kick almost.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, and obviously looking at your PBs and your time is a good indicator as well, because that's where a lot of the research is based on. It might improve your uh, run time by a certain percentage. I guess the average on endurance is around about 3 to 5%. So it's not going to make you like Usain Bolt, but it will help
Yeah.
you get the best out of whatever you're doing, and because it's applicable not only just in sort of like steady state, cycling or running, it's also with strength and force production in the gym or like team sport specific. We do find the products are applicable to like quite a wide range of athletes, and we do have that interest from dietitians and nutritionists in all sorts of fields really that find that it's applicable for them.
And a lot of times people are just looking for that 1 to 2% anyways when you get to some of those super high levels. So if that gets them a couple seconds faster and that's a couple seconds faster than the person they're competing against, then why not utilize it? Especially if it's, again,
Yeah,
naturally coming from food and it's not some kind of random ingredient or random supplement that they're trying to put in their bodies that's going to be illegal or cause harm. Miles will give it a try, you know?
yeah, definitely. I mean, there was a paper that was done a while ago. It was after the 2012 Olympics. And they found that I think it was a 10,000 meter run. There was something like the difference between sixth place and first place was like less than 1% in time if you were to break it down that way. So obviously it's not always the case with every
Nah.
race, but it just goes to show at the top level, yeah, like the small margins can actually be quite meaningful. Um, yeah.
So how do beets come from farm to bottle? Like, is there a place in the world where beets are rampantly grown and like that's it's like the beet capital or the beet country of the world? How do you concentrate it into this very small amount of like 200 to 400 milligrams in a little bottle versus in comparison you had to drink, maybe a pint or like a very large amount before?
Mhm.
Kind of take us from literally the farm to getting into the bottle and the consumer like taking it in. Like, how does that look from your guys'
Yeah,
perspective?
cool. So we actually so we do a beta organic juice as well. So we sell that to the supermarkets. That's just like regular standard juice. So those beets are grown in the UK. They're grown in Cambridge, which is literally the next sort of county, I guess, next to where we're based. So we do have our own pressing facility on site as well. But we find that the nitrate content, I guess the yield per beet can vary like quite wildly from the beets you find in the supermarket or in your garden if you were to grow them. From beet to beet, it's going to be all over the place, and also from any beet juice in the market, there's no sort of standardized amount. It will vary. So we learned quite quickly that is something that was not easy to control for, because you had to do a lot of batch testing to make sure that you're going to guarantee the same nitrate per batch, per shots, per unit. So we work with a supplier in Europe, and they basically grow beets that just happen to be naturally quite high in nitrates. They also grow beets that aren't as well. So we have like a special relationship with them, basically. They kind of keep to one side all the high nitrate beets for us. And they're pressed. The pulp is separated from the juice, so the pulp goes back to the farm. It's fed to the animals, so there's no wastage. The juice then it goes through all of, obviously, health and safety checks on the manufacturing line, and then the juice, it goes through effectively like an evaporation technique in a way. So we take down the water content but keep everything else the same, and then we batch test, and we test it for the nitrate content per liter. And then when it comes down to the batch and the shot level, so we do like 70 ml or 2.4 ounce shots, we then adjust the amount of sort of water that goes into the concentrate. And it's only a tiny amount, just so that every time we're hitting that 400 milligrams of nitrate per shot, because it does vary slightly. And obviously we want to make sure that we're hitting that, at least for researchers and athletes, because it's like with any other product out there in the sports world. You wouldn't want to buy a protein bar and say it's got 30 grams on there and it has actually only got 15
like
or
12.
So, yeah. So that's something that's really important to us. And really, in the early days, it wasn't really for the sports market. We did that for the researchers. It's really a research product, I suppose. That was the purpose for it. And then, like I say, we kind of fell into the world of sports, and we're now known to be a kind of providing a consistent, reliable dose of nitrate in a natural product. But yeah, it's not easy to do. It takes a lot of research, a lot of trial and error. We've had, getting it right. But it's worked now. So we've got the system in place. And yeah, it's just something to bear in mind for people when they're looking at other beet products. And I'm not going to mention any other brands or anything, but just be really critical on how much nitrate's in there, because that's really what you're buying it for if you're looking to use it for exercise performance. And if they don't tell you how much is on there, just ask them the question, because often they won't know, or if they do know, it might be quite low, because nitrate, you have to really concentrate it quite heavily to get enough nitrate, and that's even with high nitrate beets as well. So that's often why it's quite an intense taste, because you have to have a lot of beet really to get enough nitrate.
Yeah, that's very common, obviously, in the supplement industry, like making sure you get stuff that are informed choice or NSF for sport, making sure obviously you're buying from a high quality company. Like, don't be afraid to ask companies like yourself those questions. Like, because again, if they can't answer it or they can't tell you in a couple of seconds, like they should know. And if they don't know, like that's probably like a big red or yellow flag that you're like, I don't know if I want to. Because again, a lot of times if we're investing a lot of money into these products to then provide to our athletes, and it doesn't even have the enough amount, it doesn't provide what we want it from, like that's gonna be a big concern. And some common things that you were saying, like I just had someone on recently that was talking about like cocoa, and he was saying the same thing, like depending on where it's grown, depending on the soil, depending on the environment, a lot of these products in the sports food supplement world, like if you're not sourcing them from a place where you're getting the actual content or the amount that you need to have a significant change or difference or an actual ergogenic effect, right? You may not be getting much of anything at all. So it's like and then that's why I'm trying to bring on more professionals to talk about like where do you get your sources from? Like what farms does it come? How is it grown? Because all that stuff matters. Because you don't want to spend $100 on a product, but you're actually getting something that's worth like $10 because it's not giving you what you need.
No, definitely. And I think that's so important and I think the likes of people like yourself and in those positions who are trained in the area, it's probably a bit easier for you guys, because obviously you know how to critique a product, whereas it's the mass consumer that's often doesn't question things. And I think that's something that we're working on, in the States and in the UK and elsewhere in the world. We're looking to try and educate consumers, end consumers that maybe don't have access to a dietitian or a nutritionist, because everyone should be critical. It's what you're putting into your body, and that, as you said at the start of the call, there are too many brands and companies out there that just don't care, and they don't
It's about just
actually.
money. It's not about the product. It's not about the people. It's just how can I make a dollar? And unfortunately, like most companies, like that's going to catch up with you. If you're true and honest and like have a really good high quality product, like people will be loyal to you long term and you'll have a good sustained business.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've always been quite slow and steady pace on our growth. We're not the biggest company out there, but we know that we're slowly getting more people, because I think people are becoming more critical. Even in the general population, we're finding people are constantly looking at labels now. What's in it? Is that good for me? And asking questions, and I think it's a great thing, because I just think more should be done in that. Really, people should be questioning. Yeah.
Yeah, hold everyone to a standard. I think that's a little bit lost. Everyone just kind of listens to stuff and thinks everything's 100% true and real and everyone's honest and like let's come down to reality, and that's not always the fact. So ask
Yeah.
lots of questions. Like people shouldn't be getting upset with you because you're asking questions. It's because you're curious, you don't know, you want to learn, you want to get better. And like as a company, like you should be welcoming those things because that means there's more interest in people wanting to possibly utilize that food or that product versus getting upset and people thinking you're wrong. It's like, no, we're all trying to just get better at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think the plus that I found with your guys' product is just beets can be very challenging to take down just because of the taste, the texture. They have a very earthy flavor, and having them in a small shot and also that little bit of lemon from a taste perspective makes a big difference because it may not be convincing practitioners to utilize it. Athletes are the biggest critics. The taste, the texture, the flavor, the color, the packaging, like all those things matter. And if one little thing is off and one leader of that team doesn't like it, he will just tell everybody else, or she'll tell everybody else, don't use it. And it could be nothing that anyone else thinks is a problem with it, but if that person thinks it's a problem with it and they tell everybody else, then it's like, oh, like the world's over and like now we can't use it. So
I think that's it, isn't it, Sean? It's a lot of it when we benefited from word of mouth. We don't do a huge amount of marketing like a lot of these big companies do. And that's been really powerful for us. But with beetroot and beets, I think in the UK anyway, a lot of people have got this idea of what it's going to taste like if it's been stored in vinegar, as a child, they've had it on their salad or whatever.
mm,
Um, and I'd say probably a good 95% of the time, people who come to our stand when we do little samples, it's often not as bad as what they think it is. And I think it's just getting over that hurdle, that barrier, and just giving it a go. A lot of athletes actually love the taste. Most people tend to tolerate it, if I'm honest, just because they know it's good and they're going to get a benefit. If you can give them a percentage improvement, which would otherwise take a lot of training to achieve that, then it's quite a simple, quick thing to get down, isn't it? I suppose.
yeah, the
But
fact you
yeah,
just shoot done gone versus like having to drink a whole bottle or like a whole can or something like that. It's like because you again, if you had athletes do it before, which I'm sure you have, a couple sips, like a couple sips may be your shot, but if a couple sips from a whole bottle or container and they don't like it, now you're wasting that whole container. Versus like, okay, you took
yeah,
a couple sips of the shot, you probably got maybe 2/3 of the shot down, but we didn't waste all the packaging, all the product. So, when you kind of get down to that kind of minute details like that definitely makes a huge difference for sure too.
yeah, definitely. I think it's just making it easier for athletes. They don't want to consume lots of beetroot, to have like 6 to 8 whole beets or like half a litre worth of regular juice. It's not what you want to have before a run. So we just want to make it convenient, make it reliable. And yeah, I think it is an acquired taste as well. We do find people, it grows on them over time. And yeah, it's a small price to pay, I think, for the the percentage benefits that you get. That's what we hear anyway from a lot of the athletes. So
Yeah. One final question before we kind of end out. I wanted to ask, is there any research coming out with utilizing beet juice for conjunction with injuries or concussions to help return to play that you're seeing?
great question. With injuries, there has been, I guess not looking at injuries in particular, but they've looked at the the benefits for beetroot on exercise recovery with the sort of antioxidant profile of the beetroot. There hasn't been a huge amount of research in the area, to be honest. I think most of it has been focused on the pre. How do we get better? How do we run faster or more sort of economical? I think the whole concussion area is a really interesting area, and I think it's probably recently come to light more now in the media, particularly in the UK. There has been some research that shows the beet juice helps to increase blood flow and oxygen up to the brain. Whether there's any link with concussions, whether that be preventative or treatment, is yet to be seen. I'd love to see some research in that area being done. But yeah, at the moment, I haven't heard anything. But we are in touch with a lot of researchers around the world, and sometimes they like to keep the cards close to the chest. They don't want to,
Yeah, they don't want to expose everything right away.
yeah, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure it will do, because I think concussion in sport is huge now, isn't it? In so everywhere. So I think there would be potential basis for that. So, but like you said earlier, research does take a long time to catch up, and we might find that it's been done in the sort of real world, and then it just takes a bit longer for the research to actually come up with the evidence behind it.
And then you mentioned recovery, and you obviously have your beet slash tart cherry juice at nighttime. Have you guys done any like sleep studies or sleep wearables and like utilizing your product and or even biomarkers to see if it enhances it like at nighttime while you're sleeping, which is maybe why you created that for that opportunity?
So we haven't done any research with that product yet. I guess it's relatively new to the market. We'd love to work with universities out there who would like to use it for research. Like I say, because we don't fund the studies, it's up to them if they have the funding for it within their institution, or they have a rationale. So yeah, at the moment there isn't any. So I guess the whole premise behind the product is based on the previous research that's been done using sour cherries, and we've kind of used that evidence based, from the likes of the International Olympic Committee that found that it's like a 30 ml of sour cherry juice. So we just make sure that we hit, I guess, those figures as much as we know so far, and then hopefully some researchers out there will start to look at it from a recovery perspective. I think it'd be really interesting having that combination of cherry and beetroot, both sort of powerhouses in the antioxidant world.
Well, we've created some research questions today, so hopefully some researchers or some people in the field are listening, and put you in a position where hopefully they can contact you and talk some shop and maybe throw some of these ideas around and make some of these things happen. So really appreciate you kind of giving us a start to finish breakdown of the company, of how you guys obviously get your beets and where they get to the bottle. I think that's just super beneficial for not only for general population to know, but just for our dietitians to know, because at the end of the day, right, we're the individuals that are trying to utilize and to a certain extent sell or advise on utilizing these products. So the more we know, the more we can explain to our athletes and coaches, administration, also clients, whatever it may be. The better and more knowledge that we have, the better informed we could be and provide the best possible information out to everybody else. So really appreciate your time, and thanks for coming on today.
No, that's great. Thanks, Sean. It's been a pleasure, and yeah, it's been enjoyable.